Hello, everyone. Welcome to Start the Week with Spencer. This is our weekly webinar where parents join from all around the world and ask questions, ask us their toughest questions about kids with special needs. So wherever you are in the world and on whatever platform you're joining us, welcome. Whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, go ahead and type your questions into the comments box and I will get to them in order. So a couple of quick announcements while I'm waiting for the first questions to roll in. So first of all, Doman International is now offering appointments. So these are live in-person appointments with families of kids with special needs in 10 different locations around the world. And I'll try to name them all, but I may forget some. So we are currently at different times in 2025 seeing families here at our headquarters in Philadelphia in the United States, but also in California and in Miami. So those are our three locations that we are seeing families in the United States. We're also seeing families in our European headquarters in Italy and also in Serbia and Croatia. In Asia, we're seeing families in India and in Russia, and then also in New Zealand and in Australia. I just got back from a trip to Australia and New Zealand where we saw 20 amazing families from those two countries, and it was such a pleasure. It was my first time ever going there. So those are the 10 different locations around the world where Doman International is now seeing families in person. But even for families who cannot travel to those locations, we do remote online appointments if you're interested in having your child evaluated and to have a customized program created for your child. If you're interested in that, just reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, go to our website, domaninternational.org, and fill out the contact form, and we will get back to you and give you information. Well, while I'm waiting for the first questions to roll in, I wanted to talk a little bit about auditory integration and why it's so important both for children with special needs, but also well babies and their own development. So in the book, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, if you go to chapter 15, chapter 15 talks all about auditory integration. By the way, this book is available on Amazon. If you're interested, you can see chapter 15 is on auditory integration. Now, why is auditory integration important? Well, first of all, many children with special needs have problems with hearing. Very often, they don't hear well. Or for some children, they might be hypersensitive to sounds where they're actually bothered by sounds in their environment. Maybe they don't like the lawnmower, the leaf blower, hand dryers, vacuum cleaners, loud sounds like that sometimes very much bother them. And then there are some children who don't hear well. They don't respond to sounds. You call their name, they don't turn around. There are different sounds in the environment. They don't seem to either hear them or know where the sounds are coming from. So these children are in need of auditory stimulation to help their hearing. And so I want to talk about one of the activities that are described in chapter 15 of the book, which the activity is called Meaningful Sounds. And it's one of many auditory programs that we do at Doman International. It's one of the most foundational programs that we will start with children with special needs who don't hear well or hear correctly. Now, who are the children who need this kind of stimulation? Well, first of all, if you've got a child who doesn't hear well, has poor comprehension, doesn't respond to sounds consistently, like their name being called, who doesn't look toward the source of sound. So, for example, if someone walks into the room, they don't turn toward the sound of someone walking in, probably means that they don't hear well. Or if you have one of those hypersensitive children who don't like certain sounds, bothered, irritated by certain sounds, maybe they don't like to be in crowded, noisy places, they don't like specific sounds because it bothers them, those hypersensitive children also need auditory integration. Now, with this program, you're going to need a collection of different kinds of sounds, right? So you're going to need toys, for example, that create different kinds of sounds, right? Okay, here's a bell, right? So you're going to need different kinds of objects that create different sounds. We want sounds that really represent different kinds of frequencies, high frequencies, low frequencies, right? Because the more frequencies we can represent with the sounds, the more we can stimulate the child's hearing. Now, what you're going to do in a session of meaningful sounds is you're going to have 3 different sounds that you produce for your child, and you're going to play those sounds from different parts of the room. Why from different parts of the room? Because we want to stimulate the child's hearing from different directions. If we always played a sound on the right side, it's going to just naturally help hearing on the right side more than the left. So by providing sounds from different locations, we help the child hear. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a sound and you're going to walk to a specific part of the room, right? And it's always important when you're going to produce a sound, you should always be observing your child to see, does your child hear the sound? And does your child locate the sound, turn toward the source of the sound? That's very, very important. So you go to one part of the room, you don't tell your child what you're going to do because you're evaluating your child, and you create the first sound. Okay. Now, you're watching your child, and hopefully your child will turn toward the sound, but they may not, right? So you play that sound, and then you tell your child the name. You'd say, that's the bell. And then you do the sound again, right? And you tell them, that's the bell. So you provide that one sound from that one place in the room. You observe the child's response. Then you move to another part of the room and you create another sound, right? So you come over to a different part of the room. Obviously, I'm just moving around here so you get a sense, but you could be behind the child. You could play the sound above the child, right? The more variation, the better. So you create another sound. And you'd say to the child, that's squeaking, all right? And again, you're seeing, does your child turn toward the sound? And again, you'd say, that's squeaking. So you're always telling them what the sound is because we want to teach the child what different sounds are. So that's 2 sounds that I've now done. You go to a third place in the room, you make a third sound. You say, that's clapping. That's clapping. And that's a session, right? We just did 3 different sounds in one session. Session only takes about a minute to do the 3 different sounds, but we're providing the child with stimulation, different kinds of sounds coming from different parts of the room. Now, how many times would you do that with a child? Well, I generally recommend to parents, maybe you start with doing that 3 times a day. And if you find that your child has a lot of difficulty with it, you could increase that to 5 or more times in a day. But start with 3 times a day, begin there, try to be consistent with it. Remember, it'd be better to do fewer times in a day, but do it consistently rather than inconsistently. And of course, as you're doing the stimulation, you want to see over time your child becoming more responsive to sounds, hearing the sounds, and also turning toward the sound. Those 2 things are very, very important. Remember, some children may not be able to turn their head well because of their mobility, but watch your child's eyes, right? Does your child hear the sound? I often say, look for the child's eyes to light up. When you play the sound, do you see your child's eyes light up with interest and look toward the sound? That's what you really, really want. That's the most important thing. So as I said, auditory integration is chapter 15 in the Doman Method book. There's a lot of information in the Doman Method. This is just one of dozens of different activities that are talked about in the book. There's a whole chapter on visual stimulation, tactile stimulation, speech development, mobility development. There's so many topics covered in this book, but auditory integration is one of the most important topics. All right, now I'm going to go to questions from the audience. So wherever you are right now, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, go ahead, start to type your questions into the comments box. I will get to them in order. Looking forward to seeing the questions that people have. All right, I've got a question here. Can you talk a little bit more about tactile stimulation in addition to the sound stimulation? Okay, so tactile stimulation is actually chapter 16 in the Doman Method book. So it's right after the auditory stimulation chapter. And in the chapter, I talk about different kinds of stimulation. I don't happen to have things nearby to show you, but for example, I talk in this chapter about, for example, how hot and cold stimulation using hot and cold packs can be very effective for kids with tactile problems. So these are children who may not feel their body well. They may have mobility issues. And because they don't sense their body well, that actually affects their mobility. So hot and cold stimulation is, as described in the book, can be very, sorry, mirror image here, can be very helpful stimulation. You just always, if you're doing hot and cold stimulation, you always have to check the stimulation on your skin first before you do it on your child's skin. So chapter 6 talks about that, but it also talks about using different kinds of contrasting textures, which you can see here, like different brushes, sponges, different kinds of textures to stimulate the body. Very, very helpful. So I very often like to do, with children who don't feel hot and cold correctly, I like to do hot and cold stimulation. And then for children who are hyposensitive, lacking sensitivity to touch, I will do the contrasting textures, right? These different kinds of brushes and textures that I mentioned. But I also do these kinds of textures with children who are overly sensitive to touch. So if you've got a child who doesn't like to be touched, they hate tags on the back of their shirts, they don't like to be hugged, or there are certain kinds of clothing they refuse to wear, those kind of children really benefit from this kind of tactile stimulation. So highly recommend that. All right, I've got a question here from Lay, who's asking, how do I desensitize a child to loud noises? Hearing is good. She has 3 siblings and we're all girls. What activities can I use? So Lay, first of all, I'm assuming you probably saw, I started off with the meaningful sound stimulation. I would definitely do that with your child, because any kind of auditory integration can help with desensitizing a child to different kinds of sounds. So if you didn't see what I did before with meaningful sounds, at the end of the webinar, just go back and watch. I started off the session by talking about meaningful sound stimulation. Now, there are different things that can help with reducing sensitivity to loud noises, and many of those things are not auditory treatments. Some of them are, but some things aren't. So let me talk for a second about why children with special needs are hypersensitive to sounds. Because if you understand why, then you can start to address the hows of going about resolving it. So the reason why children are hypersensitive to sounds is because there's a region in the brain called the midbrain, which is responsible for auditory processing, which is injured. When the midbrain is injured, it hurts or impacts a child's ability to process sounds. Now, it's important to understand what are the other functions of the midbrain. The other functions of the midbrain include tactile processing, which is why many children who have auditory processing issues also have tactile processing issues. But it's also responsible for low-level motor functions like crawling on the belly and creeping on the hands and knees. So what we do now, Lay, I don't know anything about your child. I don't know if your child walks or doesn't walk. But actually, regardless, my answer is similar. We will do crawling on the belly or creeping on the hands and knees because it helps develop the midbrain. And when we do that, it helps desensitize the child to loud noises. So it's kind of surprising that one of the activities to help auditory processing is a motor mobility function, but it absolutely makes a huge difference with auditory sound sensitivity. So if a child walks or runs, we will incorporate into their daily activities some crawling on the belly and creeping on the hands and knees. Usually we do it like a little track in the house where they crawl on their belly short distances, and then they get up on their hands and knees and creep distances. Okay. So that's what we would do with a child who walks or runs, crawling and creeping. And it helps so many things in addition to sound sensitivity. It helps tactile processing. It helps vision, right? And it can help with things like organization. So helping a child become more settled and their ability to carry out tasks with multiple steps. So there are many things that crawling and creeping can help with. Now, If your child is an immobile child who does not walk, uh, well, crawling and creeping can still be helpful. So, for example, it's very common that we see children with cerebral palsy who may not be able to crawl on their belly, and they're very hypersensitive to sounds. You cough or you sneeze, and they'll jump out of their skin just at a sound like that. That's sudden. So those children, when we teach them to crawl, teach them to creep on their hands and knees, that sound sensitivity drops, right? And we teach them to crawl and creep through different programs like the inclined floor. I'm not sure if your child has motor issues. I won't go into a lot of details now in case your child doesn't need them. But if you're interested in more in our mobility programs, let me know and I can talk more about them. All right. I'm going back to see if there are any other questions. I don't see any questions yet on Instagram. I don't see any questions yet on Facebook or YouTube. So whether you're joining me right now on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, doesn't matter. I'll see your comments as they appear. Go ahead and type them into the comments box and I will answer them in order. All right, I've got a question here from Sandra. I'm just going to type it in and share it on the screen so everyone can see. So the question here is, I'm having problems with patterning. My son doesn't want to do it anymore. What can I do? So for everyone who's new, patterning is one of the oldest programs used in the Doman Method. And what it involves, there are different kinds of patterning, but what it involves is teaching a child how it feels to move properly. And what we do is we move the child's arms and legs in unison. So we move the right arm in unison with the left leg and the left arm in unison with the right leg. And so we teach the child cross pattern movement, right? When I say cross pattern movement, I mean, any activity, crawl, creep, walk, or run, humans do it in a cross pattern, right? So if I'm running, my right arm swings forward as my left leg swings forward, and my left arm goes forward with my right leg, right? Every human activity that humans do, we do in a cross pattern. And cross pattern movement is essential for brain growth and development. And so now for Sandra specifically, she's saying she's having problems with patterning. So Sandra, here are a few recommendations that I would have. And I'm giving this recommendation for you because I know you've already taken our online course. So this is my recommendation for parents who have taken our course or come for an appointment at Doman International. My first piece of advice is to film a video and send it to your staff coach, because your staff coach at Doman International is going to be able to watch that video and give you feedback. And sometimes a video will give us an answer to something that 1,000 messages back and forth won't answer, right? A video basically puts us into your living room. We can watch the video and give you feedback. And because you've already attended the course and maybe come for an appointment, you should take advantage of the staff. So I think you should film a session of patterning, send it to your staff coach. Because let's say you're making an incorrect movement in the patterning session that your child doesn't like or makes your child uncomfortable. We would be able to watch it, see it on the video, and give you that feedback, which I think would be incredibly helpful and maybe even fix the situation. The second thing is, and I can say this without seeing a video, sometimes it's good to go shorten sessions. So let's say you're doing 3-minute sessions of patterning. Well, sometimes what we'll do with a child is we'll go back and we'll say, we're just going to do 30 seconds. But sometimes it's the length of the sessions that are irritating the child. And I would say I really recommend using a timer when you do the different activities like patterning, because if you set a timer for 30 seconds, your child will know when it rings that the session is over. And that is very powerful for children. If they know, you have to think about it from a child standpoint. If you're doing an activity with a child, you may know when that activity is going to end, but your child doesn't know. So if your child knows, the timer has been started, it's going to ring. When it rings, it's over. it'll help the child settle and feel comfortable because they know the timer's taking care of it, right? So I highly recommend shorten the duration of the sessions, set a timer, show it to your child, say, okay, we're doing 30 seconds, we're hitting start, and then go ahead with it. Okay. And I think that along with the video to your staff coach, hopefully we can help you fix this issue. All right. So yeah, Leigh is saying, thank you so much. She is walking and will definitely do the crawling exercises she is 4. And interestingly, Leigh, with children younger than 4 years of age, it can be tough to encourage them to crawl or creep because those children, if they're 2, 3 years old, they're usually new walkers. But 4-year-old kids usually are at the point where, you can kind of encourage them to get down and do the crawling and creeping. So keep in mind, crawling is on the belly. Creeping is on the hands and knees. And I'd recommend doing those 2 different activities with your child. Leigh, I don't know if you've read our books yet, but if you've got a child with special needs, I definitely recommend this book, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness. I wrote it with my dad, Douglas. It's available on Amazon. If a child happens to have an autism diagnosis, I recommend this book, Answering Autism. Again, I wrote it with my dad, Douglas. The books are really helpful. They give you different Doman method, physical activities, cognitive, speech development activities, sensory activities. They really cover the entire gamut of, developmental issues that kids have. Good question. Oh yeah. So going back to Sandra's question, she said she was doing 5 to 7 minutes. Yeah. Now, Sandra, that's perfectly fine because we often tell parents to build up to 5 to 7 minutes. So it's not that doing that amount of time is bad. It's just that sometimes children, think about it. 5 minutes for adults is short, but for young children, 5 minutes can feel like an eternity. So sometimes just going back to that 30 seconds to 1 minute time really helps things go much, much better. Got it. Leigh, for a child who has a Down syndrome diagnosis, then I would definitely start. I would start with this book, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness. Absolutely. Out of interest, Leigh, where are you joining us from in the world? What country are you from? All right. We have got a comment or a question here from Haley who says, we can't wait to start the program. August for us. We appreciate these weekly webinars. So much information and understanding. Thank you. Well, thank you, Haley. I really appreciate that. And by the way, just getting your comments back is very helpful for me because obviously when I'm up here, I don't always know who's watching. So it's just good to hear people are hearing and finding them useful. Haley, any questions that I can help you with this week? I think it's great that we're going to be seeing you in August. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Leigh, while I'm waiting for other questions, let me just talk for a second on the topic of Down syndrome and other genetic diagnoses and why children with genetic diagnoses can be helped so much from neurodevelopmental programs. Because I think that one of the saddest things that exists right now in the world is there's this idea that genetics is destiny and that if a child has a genetic condition, it basically means that they cannot improve beyond a certain point. And this is a very destructive myth for parents. And I've seen many parents, when their child receives a genetic diagnosis, it absolutely can wreck the parent's hope for the child's future. And very often, when a child is given a genetic diagnosis, parents are also given information about what their child will never do. Parents will often be told it's unlikely your child will ever do this, this, and this. They'll be given a kind of a ceiling for their child, which in our experience is an artificial ceiling. One of my favorite examples of this is there's a child named Diego And when Diego, he started our program at 2 years of age and did our program for about a year and a half. And after a year and a half of doing our program, the parents were told by a doctor to get genetic testing done. So the parents did this genetic testing and they got called in by the geneticist who had reviewed the results. Now, the geneticist had never met Diego before, but the geneticist had looked at the results. And they go into the office and the geneticist says to the parents, listen, I've got really bad news. Diego has a rare genetic condition. And there are only 50 other children in the world known with this genetic condition. But I can tell you from those 50 other children, it's incredibly unlikely Diego will ever walk or talk. That's what the geneticist told them. And the parents said, we really wish we had brought Diego here today with us because he runs 2 kilometers a day and he speaks in sentences. Okay. So that was after a year and a half on our program. And what that demonstrates is that, first of all, it's incredibly harmful when professionals tell parents, your child will never do this, this, and this, because what it does is it becomes an almost self-fulfilling prophecy where the parents go, well, if my child will never do that, what's the point of ever going for it, right? What's the point of ever trying to achieve something if it's not going to, if it's not going to help my child? So it's this kind of idea of, I guess, instead of giving a parent false hope, it's false despair. They give them despair, which is false. And it's incredibly destructive for children. It's incredibly destructive for parents. And we've seen so many children, we have children with Down syndrome who have done our program who have master's degrees, who don't just have a university degree, have advanced degrees in university because they received a lot of early stimulation in the first years of their life. So I think it's wonderful that you're looking into this, Lay, and reach out to us for more information about the Doman method. All right, I've got a comment here from Gabby on Facebook. My 9-year-old son with autism does not chew. He only drinks smoothies. Could you give me a suggestion to help him learn how to chew? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first place that I would start, Gabby, there are many things that you can do to improve chewing, eating, swallowing, all of the above. My first step, and it's the simplest step, would be to start by doing stimulation in and around the child's mouth. And it's funny, right before this session, I was teaching an oral integration session with a family where I had a tool called a Z-Vibe, and I have to see if I have it here with me. Unfortunately, I don't think I do. Too bad. But yeah, there's a device called a Z-Vibe, which is a vibrating brush. That's usually a good first step where you can stimulate the child's lips, you can stimulate inside of the child's mouth, right? Their gums, their cheeks, their tongue with a vibrating brush. The vibration is helpful because it provides a deeper form of tactile stimulation. So oral integration is a good place to start because for a child to be able to chew, to speak, right, to articulate sounds, they have to be able to feel their mouth correctly. If you cannot feel your mouth, how are you supposed to move it correctly, right? How are you supposed to use it? All of us have had that feeling when you've been sitting on the floor and your legs fall asleep and you try to stand up and it becomes very difficult. Some people fall over because sensitivity is incredibly connected, right? The sensory ability is always connected with the motor ability, the ability to move. So I would begin, Gabby, with oral stimulation in and around his mouth using a vibrating brush like a Z-Vibe. But I would also recommend, Gabby, if you haven't read our book, Answering Autism, this book here, I definitely recommend it because we talk about different things in the book that I think would be helpful for your son. We talk about tactile stimulation, like how to provide tactile stimulation on the outside of the body so your child feels well. We also talk about different auditory programs that can be helpful for speech development. There's a whole chapter here Chapter 8 is on your child's communication and speech development. Of course, that's really, really important for children with autism who almost all have speech problems. And then there's also a great chapter on the reading program. A lot of parents don't understand why reading is so essential and important for children with special needs. It's very, very good for not just intellectual and cognitive development and helping comprehension. It's very good for speech as well. Because if a child is unable to speak, right? Usually it's because they have an auditory issue. Maybe they don't hear correctly. But also, very often children with special needs are better visual learners than auditory learners. So when you start to teach them language through the visual pathway, which is reading, right? When we read, we're looking at language, but we're interpreting it visually rather than auditorily. Many children, when they see the written word, it helps them greatly with being able to speak it. So the reading program can really help with speech development. So Gabby, I would start with oral integration. We have many other programs that can help with chewing and mouth awareness. There's a whole segment of the Doman Method, which is called our oxygenation programs that are focused on improving breathing. And many people aren't aware of the connections between breathing and speaking and eating. But if you think about it, when we eat, for you and I, we are able to essentially have food in our mouths, chew it, and while we're doing that, we breathe through our noses as we eat. And we never think about this because we do it unconsciously. Our brain is able to multitask the eating and breathing at the same time. Many children with special needs cannot regulate their breath. They are unable to breathe through their nose on command. And so chewing food becomes very difficult because they don't know how to breathe as they eat. And in the words of my grandfather, Glenn Doman, if you have the choice of breathing or eating, you're always going to choose to breathe over eat. Always, right? Breathing, humans can survive weeks without food, but we can only survive 3 or 4 minutes without breathing. So we will always optimize and prefer breathing over other activities. So when a child has breathing problems, it manifests itself by they have speaking problems because they can't regulate their breath to get sound out. And it manifests itself with feeding issues where they will refuse to eat certain kind of foods. They will swallow things quickly sometimes because they cannot regulate their breath in order to eat. So what we do is we have certain oxygenation programs focused on improving breathing. And when we do that, feeding gets better, chewing gets better, speaking gets better. I hope that helps. I've got a good comment here from Martin. Martin says, everything negative the doctors told us, we would rebuke it and say that the inverse would be the outcome. I love that. So basically, Martin, you said if the doctor said your child will never talk, you said our kid will talk. Is that right? That's amazing. Martin says, our child Maya wouldn't have been where she is in her development. Otherwise, she is speaking, crawling, and doing very well with the Doman program. Thank you very much, Martin. I appreciate it. I think it's very inspiring for other parents to hear that. All right, let's see what I'm going to check Instagram here. Oh, Instagram is very quiet. I'm not used to it. I'm used to Instagram usually having the most questions, but today we're getting them on YouTube and Facebook. All right, Haley is saying, can I give more information about the Safe and Sound program? Julie thinks it will become a recommendation after the evaluation for her son. So the Safe and Sound program, Haley, is an auditory program where there's special music that the child listens to that stimulates different brain functions. And the Safe and Sound protocol specifically, and while I'm explaining this, I'm going to see, I used to have a link with a video where I explain what the Safe and Sound protocol is and how we teach parents to do it. Let me see if this link, yes, this link still works. Amazing. Okay, I'm going to share this link in the comments. Yeah, so if you're on Facebook or YouTube right now, you should see a link, which is domaninternational.org / safe and sound protocol. By the way, if you can't get the link, if you just go to Google and you put Doman International Safe and Sound, you'll find the link. After this webinar, click on the link and watch. I have like a 13-minute video where I run through it. But basically, the Safe and Sound protocol works on 3 different brain functions at the same time. The first thing that it does is it stimulates the inner ear muscles. And the inner ear muscles are essential for hearing the sounds of our environment and human speech. So we have inside, I'm going to go into a little bit of a anatomy class here, but there's a good reason for it. So you understand why your child might have the auditory problems that your child has. So we have very thin inner ear muscles. And what happens is these inner ear muscles, sit obviously within our head. And there are sound frequencies, which are waves, which are absorbed by the inner ear muscles. Literally, our muscles absorb sound frequencies, send that information to the brain. That's how we hear sound and we understand speech. The problem is many children with special needs have rigid, tight, spastic inner ear muscles. So we've all seen people before who have spastic arms and legs, which are the result of a brain injury, right? We've all seen people like that. What we don't realize is almost all children with special needs have spastic inner ear muscles. And when those inner ear muscles are spastic and tight, they absorb the sound frequencies differently. Some sound frequencies are absorbed too much. That creates oversensitivity, right? So the child hears a sound and it bothers them because it's absorbed too much by those spastic inner ear muscles. And some children, on the other hand, certain sound frequencies may not be absorbed and they might deflect off of the muscles. And so that's why you have children who don't hear sounds, right? They might not turn to their name when it's called, for example. So the Safe and Sound protocol stimulates those rigid inner ear muscles, essentially helps loosen the inner ear muscles to help improve response to sounds and human speech. So we see a lot of improvement in comprehension with the Safe and Sound protocol. The second thing is, those inner ear muscles are connected with the cranial nerves that control the muscles of our mouth, which makes complete sense, right? That our inner ear muscles would be connected with the nerves of our mouth, because when we're young, we need to learn how to speak by hearing, right? That's how we learn how to speak. We hear the language in our environment and we learn how to replicate those sounds with our own mouths. So we not only see an improvement in awareness of sounds and speech, we see improved speech from the Safe and Sound protocol. And then the last but not least, the Safe and Sound protocol stimulates something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs through those inner ear muscles. The vagus nerve controls our fight or flight response. Some people know what the fight or flight is, others don't. Fight or flight is basically the human fear response, right? When we're scared as humans, we tend to either fight, meaning push back, or flight, meaning run away. There's a third option, which is freeze, fight, flight, or freeze. That's what humans tend to do in scary situations. Many children with special needs do not have a vagus nerve that works properly. And the problem is, if your vagus nerve doesn't work properly, it's sending threat signals to your body, brain and body, telling you that there's a problem. And that very often manifests itself for some children with hyperactivity. They're constantly moving, right? It's like that constant flight situation. Or sometimes they're very irritable. They're very irritable, anxious, disobedient, because that fight impulse is coming from the vagus nerve that isn't working properly. So when we do the Safe and Sound protocol, it helps comprehension, helps speech development, helps with reducing hyperactivity, social issues, behavioral issues. It can be very, very helpful for all of those things. And for that reason, it's one of the most common auditory programs that we use at Doman International. There are other auditory programs that we use for other auditory issues. But Safe and Sound is one of the most widely used ones, and it's incredibly effective. Oh, Gabby says, thanks a lot, and I will get the wonderful book as soon as possible. Great. Thank you, Gabby. Um, Out of interest, Gabby, where do you live? I'm always just interested in where people are in the world. All right. Um, um, Sandra is asking, does the Safe and Sound protocol help with skin sensitivity too? Or what would you recommend for skin sensitivity? Sandra, when you say skin sensitivity, do you mean tactile hypersensitivity? Or do you mean, I think that's probably what you mean, not does like the skin actually being too sensitive. But Safe and Sound protocol, interestingly, the fourth most common result that we hear from people is a reduction in tactile hypersensitivity. It's not one of the common uses of the program, but it's often helped. And then, Sandra, I was saying before, for a child with tactile hypersensitivity, I would generally recommend in the Doman Method book and in the Answering Autism book, there's a chapter on tactile stimulation. And I would recommend using the contrasting textures that are that are recommended, like using different kinds of brushes, using sponges, using this is like sandpaper, silk, different kinds of contrasting textures, rubbing, brushing the child's body with them. If your child is very hypersensitive, I usually recommend to start with softer textures to get the child accustomed to it, and then building up to more rough, stronger textures. But that's where I usually start with tactile stimulation. Let's see. Oh, Gabby, you're in Yucatan. Fantastic. I've heard Merida is a beautiful city, historic city. I've been to Yucatan, but never there. Okay, let's see. All right, I've got a question here. Is there a place that lists all the programs you offer, including the Safe and Sound program? I'm someone who likes to familiarize myself with as many things as possible. Good question. As of right now, no, there's no single place where we list every program that we use. It's a good question. I guess the reason why we haven't done it is, and I have to think more about this, but one might be a concern that certain people might do certain programs when it's not right for the child. That is a kind of concern of ours. It's why with certain programs of ours, we don't tend to maybe post videos if we feel that it would be unsafe if someone wouldn't do it correctly. Like some of our oxygenation programs that require doctor's approval, we don't post online. The things that we consider to be safe, we tend to put either on our website or in our books. So, in the Doman Method books, we do list a lot of the foundational programs that can be used. And that way parents can even just read the books and get started with them. Oh, and you say here you've read all the books. So have you also read, because they're in the Doman Method, I haven't sat down and counted all of them, but I think there are 9 or 10 different books. So there are the books written by my grandfather, Glenn Doman, which he wrote, between the 1960s and the early 2000s, like How to Teach Your Baby to Read, How to Teach Your Baby Math, How to Give Encyclopedic Knowledge, What to Do About Your Brain and Your Child. Those were my grandfather's books. But then there are 4 books that we've written in the last 5 years. So we have the Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, which I wrote with my dad, Douglas. We have Answering Autism, which I wrote with my dad, Douglas. We have the Doman Cookbook, which goes into the nutritional program. That's written by some of the top nutritionists at Doman International. And then my father, Douglas, wrote a book called From Immobility to Walking, which is all about how to help a child go from immobility to walking. So I ask because sometimes people say, I've read all the books, but they've read all of Glenn's books, my grandfather's books, but they haven't read some of the newer books. All right. Let's see what else is here. Um, Lay is asking, I'm thinking about getting crawling and creeping activities for my kids' IEP in school. Have you guys had that situation? Are they reluctant? We live in New Jersey. It completely depends on the school, Lay, and the school administrator and how open they are to new ideas. We have had certain, like, preschools, for example, and kindergartens that have incorporated the Doman method into their curriculums with great results. Like, just to give you one example, there was a kindergarten in Philadelphia that utilized crawling and creeping in their classroom, along with a few other Doman method programs like our reading program. And they told us at the start of the kindergarten school year, there were 4 kids who were clearly way behind the rest of the class. They didn't have the same reading skills, the same writing skills, the same attention skills. And they said by the end of the kindergarten year, with crawling and creeping, those 4 kids had caught up with the rest of the class. And they were shocked by the results of it. So, but that's it. All has to do with the school administrator, and frankly, a lot of administrators aren't interested in doing something in a new way that they don't understand. It's not because they're bad people. They've just been trained in a certain way. They know what they know, and anything new is kind of can be viewed as a threat. So you have nothing to lose by proposing it, but that's my kind of experience. For everyone else, because we have a bunch of new people here, if you haven't already, I would recommend going to our website and there's a contact form. Fill out the contact form. You'll be contacted by Colleen Hudson, who's our director of representatives, and she will kind of like lead you through how to learn more about the Doman method for your child. So if you're brand new, I highly recommend doing that. She'll jump on a call with you. It's free. She'll help you with the next step of the process. Wow, you get an A+ for reading. In this day and age, I tell most people to read books. No one, very few people read books anymore. I saw a statistic. I think it's like 50-some% of Americans haven't read a book in the last year. So you're doing great. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Oh, Cleisha's got a really wonderful comment here. We did early intervention and we did stem cells, hyperbaric oxygen. We did Napa in Boston, and nothing had her crawling 2 weeks after Doman. She was crawling. That's insane. God led us to this program. Thank you, Cleisha. Thank you. I appreciate you giving other parents that info. All right. Oh, finally, we got some questions from Instagram. I guess me saying that no one was sending anything on Instagram encouraged some of you to write. So we've got a comment here from Rijeka, who says, we're from Croatia, love your books. Do you have any method that talks about toilet training? We have a problem. He knows everything. Oh, okay, but he doesn't want to go to the toilet. So, Rijeka, good question. We don't have anything written on the topic of toilet training. We do with children on our program. If you're, for example, if you come for an appointment with Doman International, reach out to your staff coach about it. We do have a kind of protocol that we've written up about toilet training that your staff coach could send to you. But let me see if you've put your child's age here. Yeah, generally, I don't see an age here. Generally, what I would recommend, Rijeka, is maybe trying a timed approach where you set a timer and bring your child, to the bathroom on a timed schedule to see. And then, of course, if your child uses the toilet, having some kind of reward system is really good, like something special that they get as a way for them to learn, okay, this is a very positive thing. And of course, praising as well is really, really wonderful. If you have a reward system, I recommend writing it up for your child so that they know, okay, this is kind of official. If I use the toilet, I get this special reward. That's really helpful. And setting the timer can be helpful with kind of reminding you to child to the bathroom. All right, I've got a comment here from, I hope I'm saying it correctly, a CASP on Instagram. Um, so a CASP is saying, my son is 25 years old on the autism spectrum. He was on the Doman method for a few years as a child, advanced greatly. We are looking now on how to advance him socially. So, a couple of things, which, first of all, I always love to hear from people who have been through the Doman method before. Right before this session, I did a consultation with a family with a 17-year-old, a teenage girl, but they did our program when she was very young, like 2 years, 3 years of age. And, in the last couple of years returned, uh, even though she's well into her teenage years now, to learn about other programs. I want to say, if you did our program 20 years ago, our program is completely different than 20 years ago. Of course, there are many foundational programs that we continue to use, right? Where with certain children, we might do crawling and creeping, we might do the Doman Method oxygenation program. These are foundational programs that have been around for 40, 50 years. But we have many new programs that we've added over the last couple of decades. So, for example, I mentioned the Safe and Sound Protocol, which is an auditory program that can help kids with social development. That's brand new. So we have many. The last time we sat down and counted the number of programs we teach parents, it was well over 400 different treatment programs that we have now, depending on a child's specific needs or adult specific needs. So I really recommend to this parent reaching out, let me put down an email address that you can write. I recommend you contact Colleen at info@domaninternational.org. There's the email address. I recommend you, if you're brand new to the program or if you're coming back after a long time like this parent, reach out to Colleen at info@domaninternational.org, and she'll kind of like talk you through what are some of the new things we're doing, talk to you about our program and how you can learn more. But it's always great to hear back from people who haven't been here for a while. All right. All right, I've got a question here. Do you suggest to mix therapies? I mean, do the Doman method and also regular occupational therapy or speech therapy? So to answer your question, Sandra, it depends. My general answer is we usually don't recommend that, because for most families, they don't get impressive results from traditional therapies. Sometimes even they're very frustrated because of a lack of success. And it's often better to use that time to use toward the Doman method than toward the therapies. So we usually don't recommend it. The only exception I will say is sometimes a family will come to us and they will say, we found this amazing person. This person really helps our child. We've seen results. Seeing results is an essential part of this. And they've already gotten results, and we want to continue this while we do the Doman method. In that case, I'm never going to tell a family to stop something if they've seen clear results from a program, right? Because in the end, what matters the most is the child is helped. But most of the time, that's not the conversation we have with parents. Most parents will tell us, we've tried these things, it's not in providing impressive results, and we're looking for new things. With those families, I'll say, stop those programs, start the Doman method, and use the time towards something that's really going to help your child. Okay. I've got a comment here in Spanish. El libro Respondiendo al Autismo es lo máximo. Saludos desde Ecuador. So they're saying the book Answering Autism is the best, and love from Ecuador. Thank you. Oh, yeah, now they're telling me I need a translator. Sí, yo sé, pero yo puedo responder a algunas preguntas en español. Preguntas simples, yo puedo responder. Okay. Everyone, we are out of time. So let me just talk for a second about next week's session. Next week, I'm going to have a father and a mother joining this session, and I'm going to talk to them about their experience. Their names are Viraj and Ria Mohan. They did our program with their two sons, and I really wanted them to join to talk about their experience now as parents of teenagers, doing the Doman Method with two boys, the progress that their sons have had, why they felt this was the right road for them, what they did. In uh, Viraj, being a dad, had some amazing strategies that he utilized to help with the program, and I want to ask him his advice for other fathers. It's going to be a very, I think, useful and helpful conversation for parents out there, and you get to hear parents who have really been through it all talk about their experience with the program. So I highly, highly recommend you join if you can. Um, Let me finish off with the last question here from Axel, who's saying, when people are saying we do the Doman Method program, doesn't mean they could have only done the reading or math program, or yeah, basically, yeah. So Axel, it's a really good point. It's a good question. When people say we are doing the Doman Method, it could mean anything, to be honest with you, because it could mean that they've come to Doman International. We've customized a program for their child. They're doing a program every day with their kid. Or it could mean they've read one of our books and incorporated one of the Doman Method programs with their child. They might just be doing, like to your point, they might just be doing Doman Method reading with their kid. And they're just saying we're doing the Doman Method. Because, like I said, there are so many different activities included in the program. So the only way you can really get more information is by asking them questions. But they could be a parent of a child with special needs doing a Doman Method cognitive program, physical program, oxygenation program, nutrition program. They could be doing it all, or they could just be doing one thing. The only way to know is by asking them more info. All right, perfect. Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I see that there are some questions that have come in that I haven't had the chance to answer. Unfortunately, I can't answer them this week, but join next week, ask your questions, and we'll get to the rest of them. Okay. Everyone, have a great rest of your week, and see you next week. Bye-bye.